Hello, everyone. Welcome to your newest episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your host, Bernhard Gunther, and myself, Laura Matsu. And so the topic for today's podcast is going to be common traps on the path of awakening and how to avoid them. So before we get into that, I'm just going to read a recent piece of my writing, which is essentially my 2022 horoscope for this planet as well. So what I wrote goes, "Welcome to Planet Earth 2022 version. You are in the ultimate insane asylum. You are in peak samsara, and your primary task is to stay grounded and connected to God in spite of all the madness happening. And if you want to play this game on beast mode, your task is to learn how to use the madness to anchor even deeper states of ecstatic union with God, using the chaos of the outer world as necessary material for you to realize everything you are not. Many will not survive this trial by fire, but those who know how to dance in the flames will die and be reborn again and again and again until all that's left of them is their essential nature and no other baggage. This is the accelerated process of waking up and coming home to our true nature, and the path that we are all on now, whether we are willing to accept it or not. Warriors will accept the challenge, and victims will look for someone to blame for their difficulties with this task. Which path will you choose?" And basically, what I'm talking about is that personally, I think Sri Aurobindo said it. I've also heard it from other enlightened masters and mystics that what we're dealing with right now is the spiritualization of humanity. And it may not look like that, actually, because I think what's going on is that most people cannot, I guess, handle the increasing energies that are coming onto this planet. And it's actually making them go a little bit insane. So that's kind of what I'm pointing at. And the main lesson, and I've said this again and again in many different times in tweets and writing, and I'm sure on different podcasts, is like, can you work with the intense energies and use them as a fuel that you need to use for your own personal, spiritual, psychological, emotional transmutation? Because that's what it is that when life is really easy, it often doesn't give us or perceived to be easy, it often doesn't give us that material we need actually for psychological and spiritual growth. And often it's only when we're really challenged and we're really pushed in some way, whether it's through a crisis of some sort or a relationship breakup or a death, is usually when we answer the call to commit to the path of inner work, spiritual growth, whatever it is that your flavor is. So that's kind of what I'm speaking to. And really that's the approach, is that, I think true spiritual masters actually welcome challenges, welcome difficulties, welcome crises, because they know that they're the best material for spiritual growth.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. So what we want to dive into is, as the title is of this episode, common traps on the path of awakening, especially what we see right now in the times we're in right now. On a side note, I also want to point out that I have written in depth about the traps on the path towards awakening in my essay, The Perilous Path Towards Awakening, which you can find on my website, veilofreality.com, even download it as an ebook. And I also gave a lecture on this topic as well, the traps on the path towards awakening, which you can find in the video section of my website. I also posted below in the info section. But here I want to dive even more deeper and expand on all of that in the times we're in right now and what we are seeing happening right now, so to speak. And before we really go into the specific traps of awakening and also how to avoid them, right? The antidote, so to speak. Again, I want to emphasize the word awakening. We have talked about this before, but it has become very everybody has their own understanding or a little bit abused, I want to say, the word awakening. Because what we are talking about is, awakening in the sense of spiritualization of humanity, individuation, as Laura just talked about, and many esoteric traditions have hinted at this time of transition of the spiritual process, but it's not what most people think it is. So when we talk about awakening in this context, we're not talking about just becoming aware of the 3D matrix agenda, the medical tyranny, and yes, a lot of it needs to be obviously brought to light, and people, quote unquote, are waking up to that more and more. But that is, again, as I've said before, there cannot be called a real awakening in light of the spiritual individuation process or esoteric work. So, a true awakening also, ultimately goes even beyond enlightenment and all this spiritualizing matter, spiritualizing the physical body, spiritualizing your being, bringing the soul to the front in alignment as a conscious transducer for the divine. So awakening in that sense, what a lot of people misunderstand, and that also ties into pop spirituality in the New Age or many dogmatic religions, is the idea that this awakening is just this linear road up towards more high bliss and love and light. But the true awakening process is more what relates to also, we've talked about one of the universal law, the ascent and descent at the same time. It's a widening on all levels. It brings everything up out of the shadows, what we have not looked at, have suppressed within ourselves, and the darkness in the world needs to come out, needs to be spiritualized, needs to be transmuted, so to speak. So that's the awakening process. And for many reasons, also Laura just alluded to, that is not an easy process at times, right?
No.
Hence, we like to avoid it. And especially in this day and age right now, what's happening, we see quote unquote evil forces taking over humanity, the attempted enslavement of humanity. But there's a bigger process happening at the same time. Like Laura said, there's a descent of the divine consciousness, the supramental consciousness, as Sri Aurobindo talked about, and it brings everything up that is not in alignment with truth. And that can literally also drive a lot of people mad.
Yeah. And, both Adyashanti and this other writer, spiritual writer named Anthony DeMello, actually pointed at that people actually do not want to wake up.
Yeah.
They say they want to, but they don't want to. And so this is actually a perfect time to read his quote about that. He says, I think it's his book Awareness, and he says, spirituality means waking up. Most people, even though they don't know it, are asleep. They're born asleep, they live asleep, they marry in their sleep, they breed children in their sleep, and they die in their sleep without ever waking up. They never understand the loveliness and the beauty of this thing that we call human existence. All mystics, Christian, Catholic, non-Christian, no matter what their theology, no matter what their religion, are unanimous on one thing, that all is well, though everything is a mess, all is well. Strange paradox to be sure, but tragically, most people get to see that all is well. Most people never get to see that all is well because they are asleep. They're having a nightmare. Most people tell you they want to get out of kindergarten, but don't believe them. All they want you to do is mend their broken toys. Give me back my wife.
Yes.
Give me back my job. Give me back my money. Give me back my reputation, my success. This is what they want. They want their toys replaced. That's all. Even the best psychologists will tell you that people don't really want to be cured. What they want is relief, because a cure is painful. And that's what it is, that's why I personally think that waking up is a deepening more than it's a spiral up. You deepen into your own soul, you deepen into your own existence, and that gives you a wider breadth of awareness. But we see this all the time when we do our courses, is that a lot of people like the idea of what it sounds like, and whatever it is in their head they think is going to be the benefit of engaging in this deeper inner work that we're offering, in this program that we're offering, but they don't actually.
Yeah.
They don't really want it. They just want a more beautiful lie. They just want, it's like they just want a more happy dream, like Adyashanti says. And I would say that would be, maybe I'm a little bit cynical, but I would say that would be the large majority of the people who call themselves awake, who are engaged in any sort of spiritual practice that's not consistent, is that they don't want it. They actually just want, as this guy said, they want their toys back. They want they want you to mend their broken relationship, which they probably shouldn't have gotten into in the first place. And that's the tragedy, is that imagine that you start engaging in some sort of deep inner work and psycho-spiritual work, in the case like our program, or just any sort of deeper spiritual, psychological, emotional process. And then you realize that all the decisions that you made up into your life as of now were based on wounding, lies, were based on you being asleep. Like, how much would have to change in your life in order for you to really anchor this new level of awareness and authenticity in your life? A lot would have to change. So I think that's also the Pluto lesson, is like being comfortable with transformation, with growth, with change, with letting go, and easier said than done for a lot of people.
Yeah. On a side note, the program you're referring to is our 12-week in-depth private coaching program, Time of Transition Embodied Soul Awakening. The next round in January 3rd is already full. So enrollment is closed. Applications are closed. It filled up in record time again. So it's limited to 40 people. We have the next one sometime early.
Like sometime spring or yeah.
Stay tuned, sign up to my mailing list and there's another round coming up for sure.
So basically that's the main key point, is that, and we see this because we are in the field of like giving people tools, practices to do inner work on a psycho-spiritual level. And there's a lot of people who join it super gung-ho, and then all of the coping mechanisms, all the spiritual bypassing, all of the excuses come up to the forefront.
Blame, the victim.
Yes, because the primary thing is when you engage in deep soul work, your number one enemy, and as cheesy as it sounds, is actually your ego. The person that you know yourself to be, you need to be willing to surrender that to the process of change and be willing to die and be reborn again. Like I was even just thinking the other day, because of us speaking out against the COVID narrative, we've been attacked publicly more than ever. Literally every single time I open up my phone, I have like a new hater comment or email. Like that's our life now, right? But I realized, because I was able to use all of the names and all the crappy comments that I got to kind of do shadow work, do inner work, notice where these wounds tagged into, is that I've actually become so much stronger, and I just don't give a F about what people say anymore. And I'm more, grounded in my own values and my own sense of self, that I was able to use it to like upgrade to kind of a new level of individuation. Because, and honestly, if it weren't for the tension of this, of the past couple years, I maybe wouldn't have gone through that experience.
Hence, I say it again, like this time after this, what we're happening right now, you can easily fall into the fear trap, the victim blame trap, and just get lost in it and don't see the opportunity, silver lining, because there's a big opportunity for greater awakening and the friction is necessary. And there's a paradox happening, definitely, for sure, right? A lot of people go along with the agenda, but as I said, it triggers an awakening. People start to ask questions, and not only about what's really happening in the world, the external, but also who am I, what do I really want. It forces actually people to focus on what truly matters.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out, and there was an excellent quote by, who was it? Anthony
DeMello.
DeMello, yeah. It reminds me a little bit also what Gurdjieff talked about, right? And it's very, it sounds very simple, but it's also very important to understand. Gurdjieff also said, before you can attempt to wake up, you need to know that you're asleep and really admit it to yourself. Mm-hmm. Just knowing whatever's happening in the world on the 3D matrix, conspiracy, corruption level, that's not awake. You have what Gurdjieff and Anthony, many other teachers, esoteric teachers, talk about when you're saying you're asleep, is what Laura just alluded to as well. Observe yourself, your own mechanicalness, your own conditioning, programming, where your desires come from, all of that, how you actually very mechanical, the story you tell, how you engage in blame and blame others for your situation, your own insecurities, your own projections, your own shadow, your own a lot of unconscious mechanisms where you actually in that sense don't have any free will. And then again, as I mentioned before, you come face to face with what Gurdjieff talked about, the horror of the situation and facing your own inner the personality space that you identify with and mistake for the true self, the mechanicalness of your nature. So once you can truly admit this to yourself, I'm actually asleep, I don't know who I am, I want to awaken. That's the call. And that leads you to the way to cross the threshold. But I also want to add, it's very important. I've seen this time and again, as Laura just mentioned, many people don't sincerely want to awaken. They want to still stick to their old self, their old identity, their old attachments, desires, wants, needs, right? They want to awaken in their own terms, as Adyashanti talked about. But awakening goes not in your own terms, right? Mm-hmm. There needs to be a complete surrender and letting go. And that's easier said than done. On one side, all the traumas, wounding. But the other thing, the ego wants what it wants. It doesn't want to let it go, like you just mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And another very important thing, what he actually said as well, even at the end of his quote, even the best psychologists will tell you that people don't really want to be cured. What they want is a relief. A cure is painful. Exactly. And that's what we see a lot as well, that Adyashanti again, or Gurdjieff talked about, even Sri Aurobindo as well, many others, how many of us, we are addicted to suffering on an unconscious level, addicted to our story, who our victim stands, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Many of us, people don't want to let go. They say they want to be healed, but they're still holding on to the story. They need somebody to blame. They're identified with that archetype.
Yeah. Okay, so let's actually start getting into the traps. And you just named one of the most important things. And this is attachment to victimhood. And I'm just going to preface this. It doesn't mean that bad things don't happen. Doesn't mean tragic things don't happen or whatever. It doesn't mean you're just, it doesn't mean that crappy things won't happen to your life. They will. That's literally just life. And to the extent that you maybe have trauma signatures in your astrology chart, you'll have more of those challenges come. But the main thing is the attachment to victimhood is so, you cannot actually get anywhere as long as you're attached to victimhood, because it's a state of disempowerment. The moment that you actually start to take responsibility for your life, for your perceptions, for your relationships, is the moment that you can start to shift it. But as long as you think that you're a victim of circumstances, you are going to be operating in a state of disempowerment. And it's actually, to me, the attachment to victimhood is actually a way that evil works within us, because it keeps us trapped in our ignorance. It keeps us trapped in our wounds. It keeps us identified with our old stories. It's like, if you've ever been around someone who's a chronic victim, who's always poor me, they literally feel like this kind of energetic black hole, and they're like grasping at you to come. Yeah, they're grasping at you to come down to their level, basically. And that's why the victim is very seductive for a lot of people, and a lot of people who maybe genuinely want to help can get sucked into victims, but you're not helping them. If you're trying to, it's a Jordan Peterson quote, by the way, if you're trying to help someone and it doesn't work, stop helping, is what Jordan Peterson says. And that's really important, because a lot of us may offer help to people who are not asking for it and who are not benefiting from it. And in fact, actually, you're doing them a huge disservice karmically by doing that. And I just want to actually, this is a quote from Gene Keys, actually, where he says, you use one of 6 patterns to stay a victim. You either hide, deny, escape, reject, delude, or you disconnect. So you hide from your problems, you deny stuff, you escape various addictions, you reject it. Oh, that's not me. I'm not like that. You delude yourself. You fall into delusions, which can be even these new age delusions like, oh, I'm an Arcturian, I'm in 5D, or you disconnect, which is also related. So, and even just making other people responsible for how you feel is that attachment to victimhood.
Yeah. You know what you just shared, the victimhood also comes through in more subtle ways. And what you shared reminds me also what I learned from H. Almaz when I was studying his work, The Diamond Approach, which is very much influenced by Gurdjieff and the Fourth Way and Sufism and all of that. And that the teacher is not there to answer all questions, right? He made this very clear. It's very interesting. A lot of people ask us questions on email or Facebook or social media, right? And like from my well-meaning nature in the past, I would just reply and all this, spend a lot of time and energy.
Yeah.
But the questions would come back and back, and it would not be absorbed. I would realize the meaning of I was throwing pearls in front of swine.
Yes.
Right? Because understand esoteric significance. You only give when it's asked, when it's being asked for,
Yeah.
But not the asking has to be sincere.
Yes.
A lot of asking is not sincere.
No.
So I'm, I see this a lot. And then they have this subtle victim energy. They want to be truth or the solution be presented on a silver platter without, as Gurdjieff said, without paying with themselves, without their own effort, without their sincerity. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And they don't want somebody else to lay it all out in a 10-point article or something.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I get emails, people ask me like, I don't have money to join your membership for $11, whatever. But, so where do I start shadow work? What should I do and what should I read and all these things? And I'm thinking to myself, well, when I started out and I was really like sincere and get shadow work, the first thing I did, I was actually, going to a bookstore, finding a book about shadow work. Nowadays, you can literally type into Google, how do I do shadow work? Carl Jung, you can you can just do it yourself. But there's a certain entitlement within the victim mentality as well.
Yes.
Or even our work, I can see even then sometimes people don't even sincerely look at my website. There's so many articles. We have already over 70 episodes where we literally one episode is called Shadow Work or How to Do Inner Work and all. It's all there, but you have to make the effort to go through it and listen to it and read.
Yeah, exactly. For example, like when we quote people, we're giving you trailheads to amazing teachers who, if you like, even this Anthony DeMello book, which I just started reading, which has been out for a while, just read that book and actually just go through it and allow it to really impact you emotionally. It could change your life, and we live in this amazing age where it's incredible what we have access to at the touch of our fingertips. It's truly astounding. And I get that there's a lot of bad information on the internet out there, and we have to sift through and we have to be good researchers, but also just, I've noticed as well that better quality information still lies in books. So if you want to find free stuff on Google or whatever, you can find little quotes here and there. I don't think you're going to find this Anthony DeMello quote on the internet, actually. Mm-hmm. The most popular quotes in that book are actually not
you typed it out, right?
I typed that out from his book. Yeah, exactly. So like we have to, and I think this is maybe the main issue with this kind of Gemini information age, like people just want a tweet that teaches them how to do shadow work. They want a 5-step plan. They want like point. Yeah. And I get these points can be good for sure. But then I realize that there's such a subtlety to this work that you can't give people a 10-step plan. You can give people certain practices and self-inquiry work, but also that needs to be held in the right container, which is why we do shadow work within the group context, because we're holding you in that space and we're also holding you accountable to a certain extent, So, and that actually leads to another thing that I want to talk about. So the main thing, so what is the antidote to being a victim? Well, taking self-responsibility for everything that you are, all aspects of your life, everything. The person you're being, the person you're showing up as, and the impact that it has on the world. Take all responsibility for that. Take responsibility for the traumas that you've experienced. Take responsibility for, your attachment, everything. You need to take responsibility for everything. That is truly the spiritual path, is taking full self-responsibility. So it's never making excuses. So when you do something, and this doesn't mean that you go around as well, by the way, I'm not a big fan of this, like, oh, we're going to hold you accountable. I'm going to hold you accountable. No, actually, only God holds us accountable.
Yes.
And that's who you need to connect with so that you stay accountable. Is in the eyes of God, is he's holding you accountable, and you actually don't even know what he's accounting or not. It's everything, but you don't know what's good or what's bad. So that's also this connection to conscience is necessary. Yeah. But that's the main thing. So for the antidote for being a victim is taking full self-responsibility.
Yeah. And I want to add to that also, observe yourself, before, how easily you can fall into victimhood, right? And fall into
blame,
self-pity, blame others constantly for the way you feel, for your situation in subtle and not unsubtle ways.
Yeah, blame is...
And how also through victimhood, there is certain entitlement comes out of it, that all of a sudden the world owes you now, right?
Yeah.
And all of that.
Yes.
There's the ego can also, that rear its ugly head. Out of that stands the self-importance as well. Is very much tied with self-pity. And always finding excuses, right? Always somebody needs to blame, can also manifest in gossip or shit talking about others, right? Where it's like you also try to make yourself feel better, but by digging holes underneath other people, right?
Yeah.
And also like the victim frequencies coming through that as well. So, observe yourself. That's also number one prerequisite for sincere self-work, be ability to observe yourself objectively, to see what's really going on, not flinching, how you justify even your victim stance and all of that. And also, I also want to say what in regards to what Laura is shedding, that's yes, self-responsibility is key, but not following a victim consciousness, but taking self-responsibility doesn't mean that you then turn this to an extreme and blame yourself.
Yeah, which is another part of aspect of victimhood.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think the key thing too, if you've listened to our podcast, you know that I'm a big believer in evolutionary astrology. I also believe in past lifetimes. And I also believe that you chose your parents, however effed up your childhood is, so that you could learn specific soul lessons. Does not mean that you have to put up with abuse or not make boundaries or not even walk away from certain family members who are doing doing you harm, it means that you actually ask, what is my lesson here? Why would my soul decide to incarnate into this specific experience, you know? And I think at the end of the day, it's like asking yourself the question, if you're stuck in victimhood, like you're usually making the lives of the people around you actually worse, not better. Like people will respond to that in a way that they'll be, you know, people aren't into it. So you want to just learn how to become a better person, make the earth better through you taking self-responsibility. So let's kind of, I want to get on. Yeah, I want to get on to the next thing. So let's talk about another common thing that I see actually happening a lot, especially in this kind of like health movement, holistic health movement, is the obsession with just physical health. So, you know, and I think it is important to nail down diet, exercise, pretty much everything we've been taught about health by the FDA is like total bullshit, basically. Excuse my language.
Yes.
But, you know, it's not the end. It's like to me, this is a type of materialism, actually, when you're purely identified with the physical body, when it's actually the spiritual and emotional that impacts the physical body from the, you know, before it shows up in physical form. So maybe you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, you know, we see, I mean, on the basis of, yes, we need to take care of our physical health, our physical vehicle. Absolutely. Like you just said, you know, and that's to each their own, right? Nutrition, exercise, all of that, you know, because food is thy medicine. Absolutely, right? Cook at home. Don't eat out that often. Like find the right diet for yourself. Study nutrition, all of that. Go beyond beliefs, you know what I mean? Or any dogmatic approach to diet, but you really see it as fuel, right?
Yeah.
To optimize your body, so to speak.
But don't get obsessive about it.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to get. So that's fine. For me, that's a foundation. But it can easily, the trap within is also the trap of materialism ties into that as well, becoming obsessed with your physical health. And under obsession with physical health is actually an unconscious fear of death.
Yes.
Right? That's not, and having no spiritual connection, no spiritual idea, because in the end, the vehicle is the body's your vehicle for your soul, but it is not you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In the past, in the distorted dogmatic religions from all over the world, it has been abused to the other extreme to demonize the body, that it's like the flesh is sin and all of this nonsense, right?
Yeah,
and even self-mutilation, that's just the other extreme, right?
Yeah.
But what we see here is almost worship, not only physical health, but then what we also see, you know, appearance, which we see with the exponential rise, almost epidemic of, what do you call them, surgeries, cosmetic surgeries and all of that, especially nowadays. I see this is an extreme, especially in young women. We talked about this a little bit before. That's a whole elephant in the living room, the epidemic of Botox and lip insuctions and injections and all of that, even 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and it's being so normalized, right? Where's it coming from? What is the underlying drive, right? So what I'm just trying to get at, there's definitely what we see nowadays. It ties also into transhumanism and this extreme materialistic world we live in, the obsession with physical health, the obsession with physical beauty, appearance, and all of that, right? And that can be is going to be detrimental in the long run, because ultimately you're just also denying your mortality. You're completely missing the spiritual approach to life and really to connecting something deeper, and it keeps you just on this superficial level, right? And going back to we see this a lot in this so-called health movement as well. And again, we need the physical health, but what is missing is also the emotional component, the psychological component, the spiritual component.
Exactly.
All of that, which contributes actually more to your health than just physicality. I said it many times ago. I've seen this with many people I've worked with, myself. You can have the best diet in the world, all the vitamins and all of this. If you have still dealing with unconscious trauma and you're shed on all of this and suppress it and don't work on it, it will also manifest in disease, right? Yes. Many people pleaser can result in cancer and all of that. Living a double life, thinking, feeling internally in one way, showing yourself externally another way is creates friction within yourself. It's a betrayal to your soul and heart. Can also literally manifest in disease, because you're not really living an integral, holistic life, regardless of what diet you're on.
And I want to speak to that, because I think that figuring out your physical health and maintaining that is like a crucial pillar of holistic health in general. But you're actually meant to go beyond that. Even Maslow outlines in his hierarchy of needs. It's actually meant to lead you to self-actualization. And the reason it's a common trap is because I notice people get obsessive about it. And then they get basically OCD about it. They're like, oh, I got to watch out for this and this and this. And, like you should definitely be aware of what constitutes a healthy mind body kind of routine for yourself, but if you're obsessive about it, it's controlling you actually. Yeah. And it's like, that's also, you're right. It's coming from fear of death. So the antidote to that is like, okay, figure out the physical health, find a right diet, exercise that works for you, get outside, get off your phone, get off your screen, get in nature, but once you figure that out, that's only the basics. Like you're not a primitive person anymore. We're meant to actually evolve further and further past that. So work on your emotional and psychological health. I can't tell you how many times I notice people in this kind of like health movement who actually kind of talk about projection and the shadow a little bit, but then I watch them project left and right. It's like, it's like you're, and this is why I'm bringing it back to this kind of spiritualization of humanity, is because personally, I think that over focusing on health right now and just physical health, I think it's important. There needs to be a lot of education around that, but it's also missing the point of this time of transition.
Yeah,
basically.
You can get stuck in that. And it's interesting because that's a big theme with what we see with COVID and everything. There's a whole, I think maybe you can talk about it, this Virgo archetype of being just obsessive around health, right?
Yeah. And it's my personal belief, actually, that if your spiritual health is at a high enough level, that will almost act like as a transmuter of energy of your physical health. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's like the spiritual health is actually probably the most important component. Doesn't mean that you're going to become a breatharian or go extreme or whatever. But I just know for myself is that my spiritual health is actually probably the main pillar that helps me in life, meeting my meditation practice, my spiritual practice, my own studies in spirituality. And the physical health is just like the basics,
Exactly.
So, but if my spiritual health is
a starting point.
Yeah. Right? If my spiritual, emotional, psychological health is not doing well, I feel that in my body, and it doesn't actually work the opposite way though. So if I eat like some greasy fried food or whatever, but I'm feeling really like my heart is open, I feel very present, won't change it. So that to me shows you the priority. So which one do you think we should get in next? Okay, so let me just clarify that. So the antidote to focusing on your physical health is like focusing your emotional, psychological, and spiritual health and realizing that those actually feed into your physical health. So falling into these traps of paranoia, of being like overly focused on physical health is actually just getting you stuck on the ground kind of basement level of holistic health. So that's the antidote.
Yeah, I also want to add, I think maybe we talked about this in the last podcast as well, but I want to really dive into it deeper, that what we see happening right now, everything is intensifying. We see literally a lot of people losing their minds, right? Right now, currently, and it's going to increase over the next year. They're starting to check out, disassociate, and engage in a whole next level of spiritual bypassing, right? We've talked about spiritual bypassing a lot. That's also a trap on the path towards awakening, but now it has taken on new levels. What we've seen, two things. People even just who recently they claim they've, woken up over the past year or 2 years because of COVID. And now all of a sudden they realize, oh, I've ascended to 5D and I'm in a different timeline and I'm in contact with aliens and they tell me all is fine and good. And this extreme new age revival, right? Of that kind of spiritual bypassing. Or the other extreme, there's this extreme distorted dogmatic approach to Christianity, right? It's a lot of out of the new age people all of a sudden go the other extreme and are all of a sudden reborn Christians, accept Jesus as their savior, and all of a sudden anything what they see new age, even yoga is demonized as the devil, or astrology, and extremely dogmatic and very gross distortion of the true Christian teachings, by the way, which I reference a lot. I talk a lot about it, especially esoteric Christianity, all the true, deeper esoteric Christian teachings before the church corrupted it, turned into dogma, or externalized it, all of that. and the whole same old savior programming, right? Either Jesus saves you or the alien saves you. This externalizing savior program is also a matrix program. You have to understand all of the major religions are also matrix programs, distorted, influenced by other forces over ages, right?
Yes.
That kind of give you almost the illusion of an awakening. So that's, maybe we can start with that, talk about that about a little bit, how, people are using now these.
So I'm going to
both be the New Age or Christianity as an extreme spiritual bypass.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to read something I wrote about this, which definitely some of these kind of born again Christians got very upset by. But I had to say it, for me, I've noticed this for a while. And it also links into the quote that we're going to close with later as well. So what I wrote is, I'm noticing a massive trend where there's a whole born again Christian movement happening. And suddenly all these people who were formerly New Agers are now claiming to be devout Christians. And they're calling yoga poses and astrology the devil, and basically reverting back to this old school dogmatic version of religion. Personally, I don't feel for the majority of these people it's a true spiritualization of Christ, but instead it's a type of disassociative trauma response fueled by projections that wish for a savior to come in and magically fix everything. Because when life gets tough, the most common coping mechanism is to exit reality. Don't get me wrong, I love Jesus and I consider a life of service central principles to live by. But this whole new movement, which I'm calling old age Christianity, seems to have nothing to do with the true Christian spirit of love, humility, and service, but instead is dragging people back to the dark ages, where my God makes me better than you, and now I am the chosen one, along with all the superstition and witch hunts that go along with it. So basically that's the key tenet, is this idea that like your belief in a certain religion makes you better than everyone else, and everything else is a devil. And I can't tell you how many, we don't learn from history in so many ways, do we? Like,
well, that's the irony. Like back in the medieval dark ages, witches were burned because they were probably practicing astrology or yoga or tarot and all of that.
Yeah.
And now the people doing this in their own way.
Or even for reasons that, they could have been really grounded in a sense of love and service, but they were not following. Maybe they weren't married and they were an older woman. Like, there's so many ways that you can use this dogmatic religious view to call anything evil, And so I think it all started with like Doreen Virtue, who was a famous kind of tarot card / writer.
She was extremely new age.
She was extremely new age, basically. Yeah. And then she started this whole movement where she moved to Jesus, etc. And so that kind of created this wave. And it's all fine and good. Like, I'm not saying don't find your own personal path to truth. Don't find a personal relationship to Christ consciousness, basically. But actually, I see more people using it as a spiritual bypass. And how do I know it's a spiritual bypass? Because they're driven by fear. And any true spiritual awakening will actually open you up to a deeper sense of love, in my experience. And that's actually the Christian template. I've probably had past lifetimes being in kind of organized religions like this. And I understand this true Christian spirit. I've met true Christians, and they are the most loving, service-orientated, humble people. And that is the true spirit of Christ. It's not this superiority thing. It's not this thing where suddenly you're the chosen one and you're saved and everyone else is evil. No.
It's not Bible thumping.
It's ironic, actually, because I think the superiority complex that comes when you adopt dogmatic religions is actually an expression of evil, personally, because of how much separation it creates with you and the world around you. So I
was going to add this, how it's very much interrelated, this whole the extreme New Age pill, or this new very distorted Christian dogmatic approach, which I say again has really nothing to do with the true deeper Christian teachings. From an esoteric perspective, and Jesus' teaching, all of that that's a whole topic on its own. The Bible has been rewritten, there are different versions, the distortions, how you have to have a certain higher level of being intellect to actually able to read the Bible and understand it without taking things literal, right?
Yes.
Or moving it through your own bias, and that's a whole topic on itself, right? Or how people project human qualities into God and all of that, or Jesus and all of this, like beyond the understanding Christ consciousness, but that's a topic on itself. But what I want to point at the interesting relationship between this extreme New Age approach and this distorted dogmatic Jesus approach of like all of a sudden everything is the devil, right? Yoga, which literally means union with the divine, by the way. But it's literally it's like a drug in the sense, right? Like it's like I made the analogy of switching from heroin to crack, right? From the New Age to this dogmatic Christian way. But, and it's kind of like, in a sense, it gives them a rush and whatever makes them feel better, right? But as you said, it's a trauma response, the unconscious, and there's no sense reading into them. And, when you posted this on Facebook, I think on social media, and myself as well, it definitely triggered some people. Some people literally they said that's offensive. They got offended. Even what we are speaking now may upset some people, but that already shows, okay, do your shadow work.
Yeah.
Don't spiritual bypass, own your trigger, don't blame, and also understand what we're truly saying, because when we wrote it, people also completely pulled strawman arguments.
Yeah.
They were against Christianity and all, like, projecting all kinds of nonsense into what our words, which were not there, basically.
Yeah,
right?
They started to spiral a little bit. So I think it's a good time to close with actually this Carolyn misquotes, which ties into that. I mean, maybe we can say some comments about it if we have time.
Yeah, read it.
Okay. So this is Carolyn Miss outlining evil, and it's really speaking to actually what we're speaking about. So she says, that is this moment in time. It is this moment in time where our collective darkness, and darkness as a force unto itself, has reached the alarm stage, and our capacity to generate light, to utilize our light, to rely on the light, to reach for the holy light is at its weakest. We have that potential, and we are at that moment in time. When I say that the light is at its weakest, let me be really clear that is my experience in my now 4th decade of my career, that the majority of people I meet have more faith in what they do not believe in than what they do believe in. They still proceed in their life with a search for something greater than themselves, but they're not quite sure what it is. They still hesitate to name what it is they're devoted to. That's the nature of evil. And that's the game of spirituality. That's the game, the endless search that goes nowhere, because in truth, you don't want it to. You actually really never want to find God. You don't want to arrive there. That's not the goal. The goal is to stay on the ride so it looks like you're on the path. So what you want to do is you tell your darkness, I'm looking. But the truth is, your real choice is you want to stay in the dark. And that's the nature of evil. Because the real choice is, I want to stay in allegiance with my dark side, my shadow. I do not want to give up the power that it gives me. So when I say we've reached this pivotal moment where we need to confront the way that evil works within us at a subcutaneous level, like a bad homeopathic remedy, this is that moment where every small choice actually matters, because it does. And then she goes on later in this book. And one of the ways that evil engages in us is that it makes you cling to something that Buddha would say is an illusion. And you would die for that illusion, no matter any amount of proof that is put in front of you, because that illusion gives you access to what is spiritually known as one of the 7 deadly sins, pride perhaps, or your anger. It allows you maintain a position that you know is not the truth, but it gives you power over other human beings in some way. Maybe the power to punish or the power to control. One of these creeds of these religions is separatism. You must be part of us because our God is better than their God, and we have the only God. Now, a realization I came to my work as a medical intuitive, and that what brought me into this deep, deep love of mysticism and mystical truth, which I believe is going to be the new organic spirituality, organic divinity, is that our biology, our biospiritual environment, that is our body, runs on the laws of the universe. What is in the one is in the whole. You know, the laws of health. Now, put that next to religious teaching that says you have to be better than other people. The fundamental teachings of these religions are in collision with what your soul knows to be the truth. Of what your soul knows to be the truth on how to maintain your psychic, emotional well-being. The belief that you have to be better than someone, that you are better than someone, that you are superior is actually so toxic that it begins to disintegrate your immune system. And it is also toxic to belong to a religion that says that's what God wants you to do. So the time has come, as we become a global community, that those teachings have to dissolve, and the mystical jewels of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, the Sufi traditions, these are all what we will take with us. But we have to let the political packaging of these teachings burn as they should. But the mystical teachings of Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Judaism, Christianity, all of these, each in their own way, teach the same mystical truths, that we are all one and governed by the same one. And what we do to one, we do to everything. I owe you the fullness of my health because what I do to myself, I'm doing to you. I owe you my best. Therefore, I owe it to you to face my darkness now more than ever. Because one of the truths that is getting revealed, but to us, is a classical mystical teaching that we are all one, and that the power of darkness can really be offset not by bombs, bullets, but by the power of the light within us. But in order to do that, and of this I am convinced, we really have to understand the nature of evil. We have to understand its insidious ways. We have to recognize that the whole meaning of lead us into temptation doesn't mean you're being tempted with sexuality down an alleyway. What it really means is that the subtle world of our inner psyche, the way we talk to ourselves, the way we encourage self-pity in ourselves instead of discourage it, the way we play into our wounds instead of our strengths, these are all choices we make, and we could easily play into our strengths. That's why we pray, God, give me the grace to do this. Give me a little backbone here. One good prayer pushes you over. We can do that. But in order to really know your light, you have to recognize darkness now more than ever. It is not enough to think that things are going to go away and take care of themselves. They're not. And if you're alive now, we're journeying through this incredible, pivotal transformation. This era isn't like anything before. You're here because you have a purpose to be here. You are part of this. You are needed. Your soul is needed, and your choices matter. And part of that choice is I've got to become conscious of what my dark side does as well as my light. And she wrote that in 2000, or it was a talk she gave in 2019.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
That was very powerful. So much we could talk about this the whole podcast. But what stood out to me personally is here the one line: the belief that you have to be better than someone, that you are better than someone, that you're superior is actually so toxic that it begins to disintegrate your immune system. That's actually ties into physical health as well. But the key point, as she points out, regardless what your path is, what you believe in, what you study, be it religious teaching, spiritual, whatever, dogmatic, not dogmatic, the moment you think this is better than something else, this is the only way, or it makes you use this practice to make yourself feel better or than somebody else, right? The matrix has you. And that's how evil truly works.
Evil has you,
and
yeah.
evil, that's what I mean by the matrix has you,
yeah.
Right? And that's unfortunately, we see a lot in this dogmatic spiritually, accept Jesus as your savior or you're lost, basically, or you practice this, this is the only way, and this on and so forth. So it takes a high degree of self-awareness and humility, because we have talked about this even in our courses, and in my article, there's another trap of superiority, ties into that as well, right? And the humility is really the key aspect.
Yeah, so we have a lot more to say about that, but I just want to end it at this first hour. We're going to talk more in a second hour about disembodiment and trauma, the trap of superiority, trying to escape. We're also going to talk about, ruthless self-honesty. We're going to talk a little bit about dogmatic views about literally everything in the 9th house Sagittarius trap. We have a lot more to say about this, basically. Also, and another thing I want to get into is passiveness and not engaging the will and just thinking that the spiritual path is just this passive approach where you just let things happen to you.
Yeah, the misappropriation of surrender.
Yes. Yeah. So we have a lot more to say about that. If you would like to listen to the second hour, you can subscribe to our membership forum on veilofreality.com. Or if you'd like to just support us, we have a huge library of podcasts. A lot of people have told me they've just been binging on them lately during this all this craziness. So if you join our membership, you're going to also have access to the second hour of all our previous podcasts. So with that being said, see you guys on the next episode.